Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Podcast for Storm, where social awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all that nerds convene, talk, and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdiest hostess, aka the authenticated Dolphin One.
Good evening, everyone.
And I'm your host last time, where I want to be the brains for pop culture. How's everyone doing?
I am doing okay. I got a new book over the course of the week, and that always makes me happy. Granted, I kind of wish I had ordered it ahead of time because it literally came out on my birthday, and it would have been nice to get it on my birthday. But que sera, sera.
Alright, kind of a stacked week this week, or well, sort of, or playing catch up and just some things Don wanted to cover.
Long story short, we will be discussing Barbie quite a lot in the coming weeks. I mean, the bastarding thing made $1 billion this week after only 3 weeks. So, like, we and it's right in the heart of the culture war-ish adjacent things we do. So, like, we will probably be discussing it. Also, there are so many articles and so many different unique vectors of stupid about the damn thing. So yeah, we'll be revisiting the scene of the barbs in the for a while in the foreseeable future.
Both artists said they say Barbie. So, although we're not there yet, unfortunately, we got 2 articles for one we're going to talk about, which is something Don wanted to cover about 2 weeks ago, just because of full lineup that we couldn't really cover it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is originally from the New York Times. Obviously, I'm using New York Times. Google tests AI tool that is able to write news articles. It's written by both Benjamin Mullen and Nico Green. Published originally on July 19th, 2023, and updated July 20th, 2023.
Mm-hmm. Journos get the bullet too, is all I'm saying.
Mm.
And it also #learn to code comes home to roost.
MatPat theory was then on the movie in Finding Its Location. I don't really have anything to say.
I do not pay any bastarding attention to MatPat at all. That he's one of those extremely normie channels that
I mean, I watch it.
that misses the point of so many freaking things by a nautical mile, and I just don't like.
I got nothing against the guy, and I watch some of his stuff. I don't watch
Like,
it.
no, he as a person I have nothing against. It's just the concept of, like, even as far as like fan theory things go, I think the theorizer is more interesting than MatPat.
It's been a while since I've seen theorizing. The issue
He
I have
hasn't uploaded anything, or at least I haven't been notified of him uploading anything in a while, and it's annoying me.
um the, the big kind of not really an issue, but the thing that kind of turns me off to MatPat is his theories are just like very long.
Well, it's for me, it's not even necessarily that they're long-winded, it's that they're intentionally absurd a lot of the time. Like, he knows he's talking bollocks, and yet he's still talking it. I prefer fan theories that actually have, a fairly straightforward, logical, like, outcome from the actual thing. Like for example, the fact that Barbie is an accidental men's rights movie. I can explain that entirely within the parameters of the movie, and I don't need to draw a bunch of
But
weird
uh,
gobbledygook into it.
John, the thing I just want to clarify, what I mean by long-winded is that he stars so many details and things that he basically kind of gets. The problem that I have with the videos he does is that he brings up so many different things that honestly they never really seem to coalesce or connect.
Hmm.
Thus makes the original point he was trying to have with the theory
Yeah,
was never it just never makes sense. That's
yeah.
what
The other thing is like, to him there is no such thing as an incidental detail, but he also, like, completely ignores more straightforward explanations for shit, and that does bother me. It's like one of those, Peach Creek is secretly in hell the whole time, or in
I
purgatory type theories. It's like, yeah, or Ed, and Eddie is cartoon Seinfeld, and it's a reflection of human nature, especially as it relates to kids.
mm-hmm.
It's a far more straightforward thing. Like,
um, MatPat doesn't want to touch on the whole culture war thing at all in these videos. Which I mean, that's his choice.
yeah, I mean, that's his prerogative. I think I think if you're avoiding the culture war, you will end up missing out on shit, because some things only kind of make sense within the context of the culture war. Because
But
because whether the people who want to admit it or not, want to admit it, the culture war is an important part of society in this day and age. It's why I get so mad at Linkara, or I've recently started getting mad at Linkara because, number one, he vilifies toxic, fan outrage, even though he made his brand on said toxic fan outrage. And rather than stick by his principles of, no, the fans are right to be upset, especially when it's not when the storytelling is, anti-meritocratic. Instead of standing by his fandom credentials and saying, no, not only am I not ashamed of this, but I kind of started it, he he does his best to tiptoe around the toxic fandom bullshit. And what's more, it prevents him from talking about a lot of really bad comics, because in order to acknowledge that they were bad, he would have to lend some credence to the apparently toxic people he doesn't like, even though he was originally the voice of said toxic people back when he wasn't a morally captured twit. But, I digress.
right. Um, moving on. Yeah, we're gonna cover this. So the subheader is the product, which is help make journalists has been demonstrated for executives at the New York Times, the Washington Post, and News Corp, which owns the Wall Street Journal.
Again, this is at least partially just going to be engaging in some good old fashioned Schadenfreude, because a lot of journalists, when, like, working class jobs were being replaced or outsourced or outdated, would say things like "learn to code" or "go back to school and pick up another skill" or something along those lines. Well, as it happens, hashtag the journos get the bullet too. And what's more, I'm less sad to see you go than I am sad to see like working class factory jobs and shit go.
Um, moving on.
Hmm.
All right. Google is testing a product that uses artificial intelligence technology to produce news stories, pitching it to news organizations including New York Times, Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal own the news story, according to three people familiar with the matter. The tool, known internally as by the working title Genesis, can take in information to text events, for example, and generate news content. Instead, speaking on the condition of anonymity, just the product. I don't really have anything to say that.
Yeah, again, it just goes to prove how useless the journo class are. And I just want to be clear that I am differentiating between actual journalism and the journo class. If you think journalism is a class and you think that cultural context is more important than being objective in your reporting, then you are not a journalist. You are a journo, and that is just how that is how I am going to break down those categories. Journalism is not a class. It barely even constitutes an occupation in the most literal sense. What it is or should be is an attempt to inform people about shit that is actually happening. Not selectively inform them to form a narrative, but to simply be objective and report the shit that's happening, god damn it, that is of relevance or would be of relevance to someone.
The arts he acknowledges it and moves on as maybe one who wants to touch that on his channel as it is not the channel type for it. It's different from the
Well,
part.
not exactly, because unfortunately, it is important, and no amount of dancing around the issue is going to make it not important. And you will always render yourself facile if there is something important that you refuse to talk about. It reflects an establishment bias that is not tenable, basically, is what I'm saying. But anyway, moving on.
One of the three people familiar with the product said that Google believes it would serve as a kind of personal assistant for journalists, automating some tasks to free up time for others, and that the company saw it as responsible technology that could help steer the publishing industry away from the pitfalls of generative AI.
And again, this is just like with the writer's strike. If you were exceptional at your job, if you were especially qualified at your job, you could not be replaced by an AI. And if you were just, quietly doing your job and not making a moral or sociopolitical soapbox out of it, people would actually defend you even if you were incompetent. But journos, much like modern day writers, are in that special Goldilocks zone of both childishly incompetent to the point that they can be replaced by AI and overly standoffish, moralistic twits who are objectionable enough that people would rather deal with Big Brother or Skynet than deal with you. In other words, to quote Arthur Fleck, you get what you fucking deserve. Especially when you have contempt for basically every other kind of employment possible being replaced by AI and insist on memes like learn to code. Well, it turns out we did, actually, a lot of us learn to code, and now we are using that code to replace your mediocre, not fit for the purpose you're hired for asses. Moving on.
Some executives who saw Google's pitch made it as unsettling, asking not to be identified discussing the confidential matter. Few people said it's being taken for granted the effort that went into producing accurate article news stories.
You don't. You simply don't do those things. What standard of accuracy or objectivity do you actually need out? That isn't about, because here's the thing. In journalism schools, there are two vectors, or two, I guess, schools of thought with regard to journalism. There is the stenographer to the establishment narrative, the narrative forging kind of journalist. And then there is the simply objectively reporting on true things variety of journalist. So much effort has been spent on that first type of journal. There are almost no actual journalists in this day and age, to the point that when someone actually does do journalism that isn't bogged down in moral, sociopolitical, and narrative spinning wankery, they are shunned from the journalistic establishment. Look at Andy Ngo, look at Project Veritas, look at Tucker Carlson, especially since he left Fox News. Even someone like Alex Jones has more of a claim to be a journalist than most of the commentary at journos. And that's the other thing. 90% of the job of a modern day journo is commentary rather than reporting. And if the name of the game is commentary, then that commentary had best be entertaining, engaging, insightful, or particularly salient. And if you fail to do all of the above, and moreover, if you replace all of the above with moralizing, sociocultural, political, authoritarian nonsense, and selectively editing what you consider to be valid rather than, focusing on validity and legitimacy over things like objectivity and truth, will wind you up in this exact situation. Because if the name of the game is commentary, then we all can take the five people who are doing the on-the-ground reporting's information, and a lot of us, your Lotus Eaters, your Sticks, Hex, and Hammers, even your Kyle Kalinskis and your Young Sharks and your like Risings, can do commentary better and more engagingly than can the mainstream media, because the mainstream media has a normative establishment, modern day aristocrat bias, because they view journos, or they view journalists, what they call journalists, what I would call journos, to have some kind of moral obligation to control narratives and stories and what becomes news, rather than an obligation to anything resembling the truth. They care more about abstract validity or legitimacy than they do about what actually happens. To the point that many like more philosophically minded among journalists will actually legitimately say there is no such thing as objectivity to even strive for, and it would be bad to strive for it anyway. It's our job to decide what is morally and sociopolitically permissible for the audience to know. And at that point, we would rather deal with the AI than you. Because even if you program the AI to be just as insufferably moralistic and sociopolitical as the average journo, it's still less objectionable because there's less active vitriol coming from the AI. The AI, if it becomes, moral and sociopolitical gobbledygook, doesn't know any better. You are a human being who has moralistic and ideological fervor behind your sentiments when you pull this validity and legitimacy are more important than objectivity and truth nonsense.
Hello, Dragon Turtle. Sorry I'm late. I also. How you guys doing? Oh, we're doing pretty good.
We're
Um,
we're dancing on the we're prematurely dancing on the grave of the journo class. That's always fun. Journo's getting the bullet too, and I couldn't be happier.
Jen Pryor, a Google spokeswoman, said in a statement that in partnership with news publishers, especially smaller publishers, we're in the earliest stages of exploring ideas to potentially provide AI-enabled tools to help their journalists with their work. Quite simply, these tools are not intended to and cannot replace the essential role journalists have in reporting, grading, and fact-checking their articles. He added, instead, they can provide options for headlines and other writing. A News Corps spokesman said in a statement, "We have an excellent relationship with Google, and we appreciate Sundar Pichai's long-term commitment to Google."
Oh God, Sundar Pichai. I know that name. I don't know where I knew it from, but why do I have vague memories of Sundar Pichai being on the list of people who are cancer? So, someone want to remind me where I know Sundar Pichai from? Because I know that name from somewhere, and I have vague recollection of Sundar Pichai being cancer. Kind of like what's his name? Femi Odawalla, or is it Kemi? Something something along those lines. Um, or Ash Saka, or those sorts of
Um,
that might be like journalist people.
Chief Executive Officer of Alphabet Incorporated and subsidiaries Google.
Yeah, I don't know where I know the name Sundar Pichai from, but I have recollections of them being cancer, where,
He
wherever
told
they
Google.
are. Hmm. Uh-huh. Granted, there is an asterisk here, which is, as much as I hate the journo class, I don't want to put Google in charge of replacing them, because Tim Cook, I believe, is the guy who runs Google at the moment, and he is there's a hierarchy of contempt here, and Silicon Valley oligarch is just slightly below journo class in terms of my hierarchy of contempt. But at the very least, the tools that Google pioneers will probably eventually be used by people who Google would rather it didn't get used by. And at that point, you'll be giving people like Styx and Andy Ngo and other actual, varying degrees of journalists and commentariats to the ability to do better than the mainstream media, which, not that they need the help, mind you, because they already do better, but they'll be able to add that extra, like, veneer of, like, corporatized legitimacy to themselves. And then hopefully the MSM gets replaced with the new media, and that would be good.
Social Tower Gaming says hello. Yeah, Daniel likes it. You have a hierarchy of contempt.
I'm sorry. Like, I wish I didn't need to have one. Like, I wish that we lived in a world where where the people for whom I have contempt weren't so numerous that I had to arrange them in an orderly hierarchy. But unfortunately, we don't live in a sane or reasonable timeline. We live in the most absurd timeline, and in the most absurd timeline, in order to keep track of the contemptibleness of a certain class of people, I have to maintain a hierarchy of contempt. At least I have an orderly level of taxonomy here. It's more than certainly more than the people on my list. My hierarchy of contempt could manage. And if they were just a little bit more orderly and precise about their bullshit, I might forgive some of their bullshit. But yeah, they don't have any respect for efficiency or order or reason, and therefore on to the hierarchy of contempt they go.
If they didn't want my consent, they should have behaved better.
I mean, I might be an evil son of a bitch, but I have standards, goddammit. Like you know, the Marcone types may be bad and the Lara Wraith types might be bad, but given the choice between them and Helen Lovejoy or Simon Phoenix, I will take a Marcone or a Lara Wraith. And yes, I'm aware I'm making Dresden Files references, but Dragon Turtle knows what I mean. And yes, we have reached the point where human stupidity is so contemptible that supernaturally evil monsters are literally more preferable. It's not like this is new news, though. To be fair, we reached that point a long ass time ago, around the time that the Games Journal press decided that gamers were the scum of the earth and immoral.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I just made a Gamergate reference, but to be fair, the meme of the X gate will not die because the aforementioned hierarchy of contempt refuses to ever think of them as anything other than illegitimate and immoral. Moving on.
The Times and the Post declined to comment. Jeff Jarvis, a journalism professor and media commentator, said tools in the tool as described have potential upsides and downsides. If this technology can deliver factual information reliably, journalists should use the tool, said Mr. Jarvis, director of the Town Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the Craig Newman Graduate School of Journalism at the City University of New York. If, on the other hand, it is misused by journalists and news organizations on topics that require nuance and cultural understanding, then it could damage the credibility not only of the tool but the news organization that.
Well, there's good news on that front actually, because most of the journo class doesn't have those things. They do not have nuanced opinions or cultural understanding of any fucking kind whatsoever. They only have the academic dogma in place of those things. And that is why we had this problem to begin with. Because they don't have cultural sensitivity towards gamers, comics fans, anyone who cares unironically and sincerely about an IP or its in-universe logic. The powers that be have only contempt for such things. They don't have cultural, they don't have cultural sensitivity towards people who are, on the lowest rung of society and would want nothing more than affection and possibly some sexual gratification, i.e., incels. There's nothing but scaremongering fear porn about those things and or angry rage porn about those things. So, and as far as nuance goes, is there a single person in the journal class, again distinct categorically from the journalist class, by the way, but is there a single person in the journal class who doesn't use some version or other of a Hegelian false dichotomy, who believes in an oppressor-oppressed hierarchy, who believes in unfalsifiable conspiracy theories about certain people being privileged over other people and conspiring to control society, yada yada yada? Literally, when you get right down to the brass tacks of the matter, there is almost no actual logical difference between the feminist patriarchy theory and the Nazi Jewish conspiracy or the fundamentalist Christian satanic conspiracy. Literally none. Niet nil point. Because It's been a while since I've revisited this, but it's probably one of my most salient bits. But just so everyone knows, the wrong part about the Jewish conspiracy is not that Jews are not or were not overrepresented in the occupations of banking or corporate bullshit. But the reason it's wrong is because the Nazis saw that overrepresentation of Jewish people in positions of power and thought that that therefore meant the Jews were being conspiratorial, evil, maniacal sons of bitches. What actually was the case was that Jews were in those high status positions because during the Middle Ages, things like banking were considered an extension of the sin of usury, and therefore no good Christian was allowed to engage in those jobs. So, who do we have around us who might go for those jobs, especially given that they were often discriminated out of other jobs, more practical, more down to earth jobs, who aren't Christians and therefore aren't as bound by the rule of the sin of usury? Oh, would that be Jews? And just in that same vein, feminists look at the way society is structured and go, there are all of these men in high status jobs. They must be conspiring to keep the women and the everyone but straight white cisgendered men down. When in actuality, the reason why men take up most of those jobs is because men are valued in society for what they do primarily, with almost no sentimental value on as a general rule, whereas women are gifted sentimental value gratis, usually. Women are not valued for what they do, they are valued for what they are, which is women. Men are considered useless drains on society if they don't have a function or a service to provide. And that is why men tend to be more high achieving, because frankly, women would not put up with an entire generation of house husbands. Ever. They would be out on their ears in a nanosecond. My point being, when the standard bearer of journalism is some version or other of that kind of bullshit, when you can put the feminist patriarchy theory, the Jewish conspiracy, or the fundamentalist Christian satanic conspiracy on the same category and basically do nothing but swap out the moral MacGuffins or the terminology, that is not a sign of a nuanced position. That is not even a sign of someone who actually has thought about their position. That is a sign of someone who has been indoctrinated with dogma and who has not thought about that dogma beyond what has been presented to them. And in such a case, a journalist can and will be replaced by an AI because at least the AI doesn't have moral contempt for its readership, no matter how heavily they program it to do so. Moving on.
News organizations around the world are grappling with whether to use artificial intelligence tools in their newsrooms. Many, including the Times, NPR, Insider, have notified employees that they intend to explore potential use of AI and see how it might be responsibly applied to the high-stakes realm of news, where seconds, talent, and accuracy is paramount.
You're breaking up, Brainstormer.
Is short for anxiety up to. Can you hear me?
I can now. Go over what you just said again. You broke up.
News organizations around the world are grappling with whether to use artificial intelligence tools in their newsrooms. Many, including the Times, NPR, and Insider, have notified employees that they intend to explore potential uses of AI, see how it might be responsibly applied to the high-stakes realm of news where seconds count and accuracy is paramount.
Again, if the mainstream media was good enough at its job to not be replaced by AI, they wouldn't be replaced by AI. And even if they were still just as bad at their job, but they weren't quite so standoffishly snobby and aristocratic about every fucking thing under the sun, people would probably side with them on the basis of the uncanny valley and the general distrust of AI. But when they become both incompetent enough to be replaced by AI and morally contemptible enough that people want to see them replaced by AI, even the "ew, AI is scary and squiggy" effect doesn't save their asses. This is how badly the mainstream media has fucked up. You are incompetent enough at your job that a AI can replace you, and you are morally contemptible enough at your job that people would prefer the AI to you, even in spite of the uncanny valley and the general distrust of non-human entities. Moving on.
But Google's new tool, am I coming through all right?
Yes.
Am I? Okay. But Google's new tool is sure to spark anxiety too among journalists who have been writing their own articles for decades. Some news organizations, including the Associated Press, have long used AI to generate stories about matters including corporate earnings reports, but they remain a small fraction of the services articles compared to those generated by journalists. Artificial intelligence changed that, enabling users to generate articles on a wider scale that, if not edited and checked carefully, could spread misinformation and affect how traditionally written stories are perceived. Motherfucker, you already do that.
Yeah, here's the problem. You define misinformation not by its falsehood, but by its moral and socio-political and narrativistic illegitimacy or invalidity. And no one gave you the moral authority to do that. The journalist position is not a moral one. No one elected you priest. No one elected you, some kind of regulatory board of the truth. That, as far as I was aware, we didn't have a Ministry of Truth from 1984 just yet. But you have taken that moral authority onto yourself by presupposing that you already have it, and in so doing, have actively defined misinformation not by its truth value, not by whether it's relevant to the public, not by whether it's logically coherent and verifiable, but by whether it is morally, sociopolitically, and narratively invalid or illegitimate. And ironically, that has resulted in you proffering misinformation because what happens is you engage with the world and make it how you would have it be rather than how it actually is. And when you're faced with anything outside of your framework, you can't ever see a correction as simply a correction. You have to see a correction or an alternate perspective as some kind of immoral action, which convinces you that people involved in Gamergate, Comicsgate, etc. are fascists, which convinces you that Trump supporters are fascists, which convinces you that fucking literally anyone, to the right of a social democrat and up to and including a social democrat is a fascist, because apparently the new line, not only will the liberals get the bullet too, but social democracy is the left edge of fascism or some shit. So it results in you having this moralized, frankly dehumanizing and hysterical view of your fellow man and the world they operate in, which causes you to do misinformation. And when people call you on your misinformation, you use this moral and sociopolitical hierarchy that you have presupposed to say that they are the ones spouting misinformation, not based on the truth value or the verifiability of what they're saying, but because only an invalid, immoral person would believe such things. Because the truth we tell you isn't because it's true. The truth we tell you is because it's for your own good, and or to make you panic about the people we define as bad, because we say so. Thus, even honest mistakes from the AI is preferable to active moralism in the realm of journalism. I.e., once again, not only are you incompetent at your job, you are morally contemptible at it because you presuppose a moral hierarchy and an aristocratic position that you don't have and should not have. In fact, no one should have, but that's a different conversation. Moving on.
While Google has moved at a breakneck pace to develop and deploy generative AI, the technology has also presented some challenges to the advertising juggernaut. While Google has traditionally played the role of curating information and sending users to publishers' websites to read more, tools like its chatbot Bard present factual assertions that are sometimes incorrect and do not send traffic to more authoritative sources such as news publishers. Technology has hold on.
Sorry, it's just the authoritative source thing triggering. Okay, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the technology has been introduced as governments around the world have called on Google to give news outlets the largest slice of its advertising revenue. After the Australian government tried to force Google to negotiate with publishers over payments in 2021, the company forged more partnerships with news organizations in countries under its News Showcase program.
Okay, for those in the very, very cheapest of seats, authority should enter into the conversation nowhere, you nutcases. Authoritative sources is basically you admitting you are committing an appeal to authority. And that is a logical and, frankly, in this context, moral and sociopolitical fallacy you are committing. Truth claims do not revolve around authority. Authority should be a natural outcome of the truth value of your claims and or the logical consistency of your claims, which, as I just went over a little bit earlier, when I made the point about the whole nuance and cultural understanding thing, even from a logical point of view, even if every single thing you ever published was at least somewhat true, which it isn't, but that's another story. You would still be plugging it into a logically incoherent algorithm to an equation that will not provide actual logical outcomes because the actual logical underpinnings of the claim are not true. See, this is the thing, and this is me philosophically spurging again, but fucking hell, it's my show, so I can or our show. So, and Brainstormer lets me do that because he doesn't like doing most of the talking. But point being, even if you take true information, if you assemble it in a false way, if you assemble it in a logically inconsistent or incoherent way, there is no conceivable way that the end result of that process will be true or logically coherent or legitimate. Because even if you build a mathematically implausible object or structure with the strongest, most viable kinds of material, it will still crumble because the rules of logic actually supersede the rules of empirical reality. And I realize I'm getting off into the metaphysical weeds here, but point being, you take truth, you put it in an illogical or irrational framework, you will get illogical and irrational and probably untrue result from it, because just like with the physiological example or the metaphor I just gave, you take the strongest material possible, you try to make a mathematically implausible structure from them, it's still going to crumble because math actually trumps physical reality in certain circumstances, and logic is what underpins mathematics. So there. That's why I get so mad at this one guy I talk to on Facebook a lot of the time, because he will take arguably true information and he will assemble it in the most dehumanizing, hysterical, goddamn incoherent clusterfuck of panic mongering I could ever even imagine. And when I call him on the obviously hysterical, obviously dehumanizing, obviously panic mongering bullshit he's doing with that obviously true information, basically making a mockery of it, he screams at me not to deny the data and just spams more and more data, as though the problem isn't with how he is choosing to assemble it. And then when I point out that the problem is with how he assembles it, he accuses me of gaslighting, because he genuinely thinks there is no other logical way to assemble the information he provides, even if I give several examples of better ways to organize that data. Fucking hell. Sorry. Got off topic there, but moving on.
Last paragraph. Publishers and other content creators have already criticized Google and other major AI companies for using decades of their articles and posts to help train these AI systems without compensating publishers. News organizations including NBC News and The Times have taken a position against AI sucking up their data without permission.
I don't really have anything to say to that. That wouldn't just be repeating the same shit again. Moving on.
Give me a second. It's loading. This is going to be a fun one. I say rhetorical, no, I say ironic.
Yes, your sardonic sarcasm is noted. Well done.
So this was originally from Polygon.com, I believe. Yeah, Polygon.com. Nia Sarkeesian is shutting down feminist frequency at 15 News. It's written by Nicole Carpenter and published August 1st, 2023. Obviously, I'm using it.
Yeah. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Hey, hey, hey. Goodbye.
Actually, this made me. Actually, I just thought of something. Did we? We're probably not going to actually the tropes versus women videos.
I suggested it a long time ago, and you vetoed it on the grounds that you didn't want to suffer that much.
Oh yeah,
and I've respected your veto. If you change your mind, we can do one.
To be
But
fair,
it probably will just be one because I can't. I mean, we almost probably should do one now that it's over, just to like, do a post-mortem on her arguments and shit. But I mean, we've done John McIntosh, who was her significant other for the longest time, and her like editor. So like we've been Anita adjacent a couple of times, but yeah, we can do one the next time we reach a milestone. I'll just have to look through and find the most obviously wrong one to go through.
Anyway. Moving on.
Yep.
Nia Sarkeesian is tired. It's been more than 10 years since Sarkeesian first released Tropes vs. Women video. It's been 15 years since Sarkeesian's oldest video and the start of what's now known as feminist frequency. Over the years, she and her team created several groundbreaking YouTube series, hundreds of podcast episodes, done with dozens of collaborators, games industry focused support hotline, and a two-body award-winning non-profit.
Like, I want to take the piss out of the groundbreaking statement, but honestly, if it weren't for Anita Sarkeesian, it's highly probable that a large percentage of the like anti-social justice community wouldn't exist. So uh, Anita is kind of like Greta Gerwig in the recent Barbie movie in the sense that her biggest contribution to the world is going to be inadvertently creating the opposite of her.
Load up.
Yep.
Uh, the sort of work that's both essential and draining, work that's so meaningful it's easy to feel an obligation to continue, even in the face of exhaustion. That's why it's time for a break. I'm ending feminist frequency because I'm extremely burnt out. Vacation told Polygon. I can't vacation that off. I can't offload that anymore. I mean,
Anita,
not entirely wrong.
you still were paid for 20 videos you haven't made yet, by the way. Because back in 2013 when she was raking in all of the establishment money, she was her next 20 Tropes v Women videos were financed and she never made them. So like I get it. I'm a YouTuber too. Like I get the burnout and I get the you occasionally can't get your ideas out right and so on and so forth. That's why the first video in the last like probably year I made last week and it was two video they were two videos on the JSG versus V drama. But yeah, I'm also not paid millions upon millions of dollars to make said content. Um, like I don't have a Patreon or backers yet because I'm still not a large enough channel to justify that. But you rest assured that if I were paid millions upon millions of dollars to make um 20 videos, those 20 videos would be being made and they would have the highest fucking production values I could manage. You still have not, and it's been 10 years. So like you you're you were paid for work you haven't done yet in 10 years. And sorry, no, Anita, you don't get to use the burnout excuse at that point. It, if you can't be arsed to make 20 videos over the course of 10 years, having been paid millions of dollars to do so, then you fail. I'm sorry. That's just a do not pass go, do not collect my sympathy thing at that point.
Okay, so Tom, you presumably got most of the things on the videos, and you did half the work when we can episodes of the week.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, she got paid for like 30 to 50 feminist tropes versus women videos. She only made 10 of them. So yeah, as a YouTuber, I can sympathize with the burnout thing and the other things you've said. Um, if I were paid millions of dollars to make 20 videos, ye merciful gods, would I make them, and they would be like movie length productions because I would feel the need to put the money somewhere. And that's the other thing. Like the stuff Anita did, it's not that her production values are bad. It's that her production values are staggeringly generic for a YouTuber. Like I am limited by the resource of I don't have the disposable income for like production apps, and I'm limited to my phone. But even I can like slap filters and shit on the pictures and stuff that I use. Like that's what
Yeah,
takes up most of my time is creating a visually pleasing display for my videos. And I mean how I made my own title sequence. I used a portion of a song that I got from my friend. He specifically made it for me, and I made my own title sequence on fucking Power Director, and I still fucking use it. And it looks relatively equivalent to the kinds of visual styles that Anita uses in her videos. And she also
Yes,
has a
I
team, and she also has money, and she also, you know, she also has production values behind her. So, like, the fact that her videos look as generic and sort of basic bitch YouTube as they do, and they did even back in 2013ish, um, is startling because I'm gonna use the same criticism for Anita that I do for Hollywood, which is if you are given X amount of money for the production budget of your thing, the first and foremost port of call is you put as much of that money as feasibly possible on the fucking screen.
no, it wasn't all released at once. She released them over the course of 2 to 4 years. She released 10 episodes over 24 to 48 months. So burnout wasn't even a thing that could happen. She
Well,
obviously
and
didn't make them. Hold on, I want to finish this comment.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
She obviously didn't make them all at once. It was making them issue. The last video was released in 2018, and she posted the first one in 2014. And I did want to bring up an example of my own personal thing of like when I was uploading videos and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, when I first started out, I was literally just recording on my phone. Like I put on skies and stuff, uh, just like wrap my face around because I didn't want to my face or anything.
Hmm.
I just looked at my computer and read a script that I wrote out. Scripts kind of helped me because I never had that before. But then I got Power Director. Yeah, I kind of did the same thing you did, Dalton. Uh, so
This live stream apparently became a stealth ad for Power Director because Power Director's actually a pretty awesome free app, all things considered.
yeah,
Um,
it's not bad. I was used to using Adobe Premiere when I started using Power Director, like for computers and stuff. But it's not bad. Like it's quick and easy. So
yeah, like I said, I just am limited in funds, so I couldn't pay for a monthly or yearly subscription to a
oh, yeah.
fancier app. So for the first couple of years, I used Power Director, and then I moved to an app called Movie Maker Pro. My only criticism is I really wish I could get the Power Director watermark out of my title sequence, and but I can't, apparently. Either way, either way, the other point I wanted to make that was brought to mind when Ahsoka brought it up was um the article itself is being somewhat disingenuous because typically when like the statement it's 10 years of feminist frequency yada yada or 15 years of feminist frequency, that sort of implies a relatively consistent, fairly thorough amount of those years was spent making videos and releasing videos. Like, for example, if I was to say it's been 10 years of Channel Awesome or that guy with the glasses, that would actually be, which I think they basically got disbanded right around the 10-year mark, mind you, but because the change the channel controversy happened in 2017, 2018, I think. But that would actually be a legitimate case because most people who were on that site for the time that they were on that site were releasing weekly or bi-weekly videos. And even the ones that were only releasing videos a couple times a month um, were still doing relative like a week's worth of work on those videos. Let alone people like Blockbuster Buster and Linkara who created an entire lore, and yes, I actually like the lore. Don't fucking at me. For their review shows, and actually had some pretty decent, albeit independent movie looking production values. Um, and yet they never had the millions of dollars that someone like Anita Sarkeesian um, earned during her heyday. Anita had a short-lived period from like 2013 to 2016, 2017 where she was in demand, and most of that was not when she was even making the videos, and her production values were actually less impressive than someone like a Blockbuster Buster or Linkara, who were working with Adobe After Effects or Adobe Premiere and no money. So there, like Linkara's magic gun effects and the Blockbuster Busters, hammer of the fandom effects, um, or Buster Hammer effects were more impressive than anything Anita did visually. Probably took more work than anything Anita did visually, and they did it on a pittance and some passion. Not to mention the actual movies that Linkara and company made for, I want to say, like less than a fourth of what Anita was paid to make 20 regular, relatively standard YouTube videos. Let alone, the AVGN, i.e., Angry Video Game Nerd, and his production values as well. And again, another person who made a movie for maybe a fifth of what Anita got paid to make those 20 videos that she never made. And those guys did those sorts of videos every week, on the week, or every couple of weeks for 10 years, and several of them are still going, even though they're no longer affiliated with that guy with the glasses / Channel Awesome. And if Linkara can build up an entire 10 years worth of lore videos, as in he spliced together all the lore based compilations of his videos, and they're each of them movie length, and there's 15 of them in the time we're supposed to be venerating feminist frequency for doing maybe a couple weeks worth of work every couple of years, and isn't even being consistent about her upload schedule or even trying to be. Yeah, no. If we get to venerate Anita for this bullshit, then where is the Linkara, the last generation's voice of the fandom uh, articles? And I know that Linkara and company are actually more in line with Anita's politics than my own, so they probably would disavow this compliment I'm paying them. But the fact remains, the people who were affiliated with Channel Awesome back in the day did at least twice as much work as Anita has done full stop every week on the week, or every couple of weeks on the week, for at least 10 years, between 2007 and 2017. So there. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay, so picked up on Sylvie's comment. She legit was just lazy. She bought a house after doing that money. Like a 400, 500K dollar house. Videos could be made within a few hours.
Yeah, and again, compare the production values of a standard Anita Sarkeesian feminist theory review to, actually, you know what? Let's compare like for like, shall we? Let's compare the most like for the most like, shall we? Let's take Lindsay Ellis, the nostalgia chick. And I know she distanced herself from the nostalgia chick label later on, and so much, good for her and all. But for the time that she was at least nostalgia chick adjacent, because she actually ditched the nostalgia chick label quite early on. Her videos were also rooted in, academically sanctioned feminist theory. Her videos were also pop culture reviews. Her videos were also relatively high end production value, all things considered. And comparing like to like, Lindsay and her staff put more work in than the person who was making 500 grand per episode or some shit. And again, while Lindsay wasn't quite as entirely consistent as the other reviewers, I don't think. At least I remember in like when I was in college in like 2013, 2014, and 2015, her videos seemed to come out a little less often than the other videos. But even so, like once or twice every couple of months is still a better batting average than Anita pulled. And even as far as feminist theory goes, Lindsay was better at it. She was actually like, for all that I think feminist theory is bunk, and I do, and I'm an egalitarian, a women's rights advocate, and a men's rights advocate, but I'm not a feminist. For all that I think feminist theory is bunk, she was better at presenting it and doing so in a less contemptible, less standoffish way 99.9% of the time. She got a little bit worse when she became a BreadTuber, because BreadTube does that to people, it seems. But even so, Anita Sarkeesian was a ripoff of the Nostalgia Chick even back in the day, and she did it better. Lindsay did it better than Anita did. And yet Anita's the one who pulled in the big bucks because she pulled the victim card. Whereas Lindsay, for the vast majority of her most relevant segment on as a e-celebrity, did not do that. She was more, at least during her height of popularity as the Nostalgia Chick, she was much more like second wavy and less oppressor and oppressed focused than was Anita. Or at the very least, she was able to be charming and compelling with it when Anita could not. Because for all of her faults, I think Lindsay Ellis, aka the Nostalgia Chick, was an actual nerd who actually gave a shit about media, even underneath all the feminist flavored academic gobbledygook. Whereas Anita was not a fan of anything except for her favorite secular church, which is feminism.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Sarkeesian's work made feminist critique of the video game industry impossible to ignore. Your help has listened. Yes, the video game industry has a long way to go. Not everyone listens. But feminist frequencies criticism helped bring the language of feminism to space. It was often important to. So feminist frequency started on YouTube. It grew into an organization that made a tangible impact on the industry through its work with videos and videos.
And again, it's very telling that for all of your allegedly anti-establishment politics, Anita, you were buoyed up to the tune of millions by the establishment, and you were even invited, along with Zoe Quinn and Brianna Wu, to the U-fucking-N. Meanwhile, for all of your allegedly radical politics, the grassroots of the internet hated your guts and was not shy in conveying this information to you, whereas the establishment dropped its pants and opened wide. And yet you think you were victimized and oppressed by the poor plebs telling you you are wrong, my lady, and you don't consider the millions upon millions you were paid by the establishment and invitations and legitimacy to, speaking engagements and the UN. You don't consider that a sign that you are part of the aristocracy, apparently. And again, to Lindsay Ellis's credit, while she has over the years gained a little bit of mainstream legitimacy, she was always more popular among actual people, the plebs here on the internet, than was Anita Sarkeesian. Am I saying that I think that the world would be better off if Lindsay Ellis had been given Anita money? Probably yes. Would she eventually probably have gone as mad with power as Anita seems to have, and it probably would have still wound up bad. Sure, but at least it would have gone towards someone who has or at least who had a geek's soul and some 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 humorous and intellectual competency, whereas Anita has none of the above. Moving on.
Though some of feminist frequency initiatives like programs, creative wins, accountability groups, respect, will live on in different ways, the organization as a whole will disband by the end of the year. The games and online harassment hotline, which achieved fun up in 2019 as the industry reckoned with systemic sexism and harassment, will run through the end of September.
And again, I just want to point out that for most of her tenure as being the Nostalgia Chick or Nostalgia Chick adjacent, Lindsay Ellis was almost always in on some version or other of the joke and never once played the victim card. Anita shows up for 5 minutes, plays the victim card, and is, buried in a landslide of money from the establishment guilt machine. Again, Lindsay went insane when she became a breadtuber, as is the wont of breadtubers. And she was always at least a little shaky even back then because feminist theory. She was at least a likable and engaging conveyor of that feminist academia, and she was smart enough to actually engage with the information. Anita was not. Anita had help out the wazoo from both the establishment and from her own people, especially John McIntosh, and she still came off as a contemptible twit who did not know anything resembling what the fuck she was talking about. And again, comparing like to like, for whatever you may think of Grace Randolph, she has been doing her Beyond the Trailer thing for, I think, since before Anita even showed up. And she's been doing it every week on the week, come whatever trailers might come to react to, come whatever movies there might be to react to. And she is, and even Grace Randolph, for all that she is contemptible, and for all that she is stupid, and for all that she is occasionally wrong, or rather significantly occasionally wrong, mind you, for all that Grace Randolph is kind of a living meme and kind of a joke to most of the internet, and, I can't even dispute it necessarily. She at least does this every week, on the week, and she's done it since, I think, before Anita showed up. So, whereas Anita made a handful of videos almost 10 years ago and has not added to their number in the last 10 years. Or rather in the last like 5 or 6 years at least. Never mind that she was also less competent than Grace Randolph, and that is saying all that it is saying. Never mind that, again, Grace at least does have some kind of veneer of fandom in her soul somewhere. Even if it's a very minor one, she still is geek-y, or approaching it. And Anita basically was a fan of nothing but feminist theory and chose video games on purpose to use as an artistic weapon to push her feminist nonsense. She is on the record as saying she does not like and does not play video games. She does not engage with the material out of a love for the material, or even a love to see the material get better. Again, in that same vein, Grace Randolph and Lindsay Ellis both have Anita nicked in this regard. But Anita engaged with video games specifically to use them as a weapon. And even insofar as both Lindsay Ellis and Grace Randolph occasionally do allow their feminist perspective to run away with them a bit, they're still better at it than Anita because they actually do have some regard somewhere for the material. Anita does not. She uses it as a weapon because her concern is solely, and I mean solely, two things: her own self-aggrandizement and her feminist morality. And wherever the two may intersect and overlap. Moving on.
Okay, so Santoro Anita also wasn't a married creature. She was played more than normies and focused on the feminism part, so that's this topic is far more.
Which I believe I did just address for like a minute and a half.
He wrote that like, to be fair, he wrote that like a few minutes ago. So
yes. So if we came to this point at the exact same time, Dragon Turtle jinx. But yes, that it must be said that even on the vector of very feministy cultural commentators, Grace Randolph and Lindsay Ellis both have Anita nicked and have for a long ass time and are much more consistent and more sincere about being some kind of YouTuber. Granted, Lindsay left because she was weighed down by her own audience because again she became a bread tuber and distanced herself from being the nostalgia chick, and it did not go well for her. But during the time she was here basically as often as she could be here. Whereas Anita peaked 10 years ago and only did 2 years of work, if that, during that time. Whereas other producers do it every week on the week or did and are better at it.
uh, okay.
Again, it didn't used to be Dragon Turtle. There was a time where even under the auspices of the feminist lens, Lindsay Ellis, aka the Nostalgia Chick, was a good and entertaining person. And Grace Randolph, even if she is crazy and lame and stupid sometimes, she still has her moments of being a genuine nerd. Um, whereas yes, now it definitely is contempt for geekdom. That I mean, look no further than what happened to Movie Bob. There was a time too when Movie Bob was a relatively sane individual. That time has long since passed because he is even harder into the feminist paint than Anita is, and that is so often typical of male feminists, it seems. But yeah, no, Movie Bob basically disavowed everything that used to make him even remotely human or nerdy, and is now just a shell of his former self. But there was a time, I swear to fucking God, where 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 um where Movie Bob actually had a soul. I'm not sure what happened to it. I'm not sure who he sold it to or who he accidentally gave it away to, but there was a time when even Movie Bob had a soul. It was a long, long time ago.
Alright. So I think we're going to cover a little bit more of this, and just because of time, how long this article actually is, we are going to have to pick it up at a later time.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to try to finish this and then leave all the Barbie articles for next week, or at least a significant portion of them.
At 10% of this article.
Hmm?
We're not even at 10% of this article yet.
Well, let's at least try to get to half then.
Not the first time Sakizin has considered shutting down feminist frequency. She found it had reached its natural conclusion several times before. There was always something new pulling her and the team back into it. But this time, it's sticking. Beyond needing to rest and recover from that burnout, Sarkeesian deeply believes that there's value to ending progress now. There doesn't need to be some catastrophic ending. I don't think we talk about that enough. He said, we built this whole thing, and why would you give it up? Sometimes it's better that we can move on to new things, take risks, and do things that challenge us.
Anita, Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, feminist frequency legacy is twofold. There's a unique video essays and criticism on its YouTube channel, and its external training and support programs born out of that initial success. YouTube itself was only a few years old when Sarkeesian started publishing videos on the site in 2009. One of the earliest is a 5-minute musing on Dollhouse's TV renewal compared to the cancellation of Terminator and Sarah Connor Chronicles. Videos are simple in premise, with Sarkeesian talking right into the camera, sometimes with accompanying videos or images. Found great success with this format over the years, using it in Dope vs. Women in video games, breakout series that hit the industry like a lightning bolt.
Again, bitch. ABGN started in 2006. Channel Awesome / That Guy with the Glasses started in 2007. And the Nostalgia Chick, I believe, showed up late 2008 or late 2009. So, this I'm so revolutionary because I'm the first, feminist video essayist. Again, I know Lindsay Ellis, if she saw this, would hate my guts, but it must be said that she did it first and did it better. Like, it genuinely must. Like, for as much as she went nuts and became a bread tuber later on, and yada yada yada, for as much as she was there, for as much as she contributed to the change the channel controversy that was basically an extension of #MeToo, like, for all of the many faults of one Lindsay Ellis and the other female reviewers on That Guy with the Glasses, they did it first and did it better than you, and they managed to do it in a way that spoke to to both the normies and the actual nerds who like movies and video games and various and anime and manga and all the other various geek ephemera that you literally admitted you had no interest in and were just using as a weapon. And again, for as much as you can criticize Grace Randolph, and you can, she did it first, did it better, and more consistently than you. Like, all of these personalities that I'm mentioning, be it Lindsay Ellis, be it Grace Randolph, be it Pure Lupa, be it Mars Girl, be it that chick with the goggles, although she wasn't on That Guy with the Glasses for very long, mind you, be it Denna, like all of these people, like, they did it first and did it on a weekly fucking schedule with maybe 1% of the budget, but like 500% of the actual care and effort. And so, for as much as you might disagree with any of the above, they are at least less contemptible and more worthy of praise than Anita Sarkeesian. Granted, that is not a high bar to clear, mind you, but it must be said. Even in terms of like feminist gobbledygook in relation to film criticism, Lindsay Ellis did it first, did it better, and did it more consistently than you, Anita. So you don't get to wear the crown of I was the first video essayist, I was the first feminist. No, that in fact, I think there might even be a retrospective video from a channel that I watched recently that literally gave Nostalgia Chick the title of the first video essayist, which honestly, given her like take on the content, I co-sign that. That the idea of Lindsay Ellis basically pioneering what would later become known, or splintering off what would later become known as the video essayist format from the reviewer sphere format. It's her. It's Nostalgia Chick, and or possibly even Grace Randolph, because I'm pretty sure she also came before you, Anita. And even if she didn't, she also manages to do it better. And when she bothers to be geeky, she can be geeky, whereas you cannot be geeky no matter how much effort is put into trying to make you seem that way. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Uh, each episode of Tropes vs. Women in video games tackle a different prominent trope. Season appeared on screen explains the viewer not only what these tropes were and where they showed up in video games, but provided critical feminist analysis. Sarkeesian took on concepts like damsel in distress, which explored the infamous trope of women being saved, women as a reward, which is exactly what it sounds like, and strategic butt covering, analysis of the way in-game cameras linger on women's bodies, particularly their butts.
And this is the other thing. One, your covering of these tropes was logically incoherent and wrong. Two, it was exceedingly facile. And three, you did these videos highlighting this one trope, and it didn't even constitute like a review of any of these properties. You didn't actually engage with the material at all. Unlike, again, I realize how much this sounds like I'm simping for the old days of Tigwatig and what have you, but like, it must be said that there was a time before the culture war, and in that time before the culture war, like almost every voice within geekdom got their voice. And as far as like the feminist adjacent stuff went, um Lindsay Ellis and even to some extent Obscurus Lupa did it better and more engaging with you, and actually managed to review and engage with the material they were covering while also waxing lyrical about these, tropes and things. And they were actually more intelligent in how they covered them because they actually, did that thing where they knew and cared what the fuck they were talking about. Moving on.
Me and my team were pioneering a space, the season said. It was at the very beginning of video blogging in India. We were talking about representation very early on in the mainstream way. It wasn't a popular thing to do outside of academia. We continued and we did. Hold on. I want her full font first before.
I know, it's just the bitch is rewriting history, and it's history I remember and was there for, so like it's making me inattentive. Go ahead.
We continued and we did. People paid attention and people started caring aggressively. Across 2 seasons of tropes versus Sarkeesian's work has racked up millions of views, earning her an appearance on the Colbert Report, and spawned on Time Magazine's 2015 list of 100 most influential people.
Again, bitch, if you are talking about like critically examining stuff through video format and like the reviewer sphere was once one of the biggest vectors on the online sphere. Like the Channel Awesome and adjacent, like that guy with the glasses personalities almost single-handedly kept Blip afloat from the year 2009 all the way up through 2017 when Blip shut down. And that was probably the foreshock of the end of that guy with the glasses, mind you, but there were enough reviewers just on that one site, and they had a strong enough fan base to basically almost single-handedly prop up Blip TV. So, where in the lake of fire do you get off, Anita? Seriously, it's you act as though the world didn't, or the world of like feminist adjacent videos didn't exist before you showed up, and I can rattle off at least 5 female reviewers on that guy with the glasses alone, mind you, that would be somewhere in that like feministy sort of space. There was Lindsay Ellis, aka the Nostalgia Chick. There was Mars Girl. There was that chick with the goggles. Though again, she wasn't on for very long. There was Obscurus Lupa. There was Diamanda Hagen. Like the list just goes and goes and goes. There was Maven of the Eventide, although she was kind of a spin-off of the Nostalgia Chick, mind you, because she was one of Lindsay's friends, and she had a love for like horror and vampire related shit, which again I can't fault them for. Like at least a third of the That Guy with the Glasses presenters were women and were definitely of a feminist leaning sort of persuasion. Um, so I don't know where you get off. But and even in terms of covering the like feminist adjacent leaning stuff, um, a lot of those presenters did do that, and there were several of the male presenters who did that on occasion, like uh, like Owen Citizen, aka Kyle Calgren from Rouse Health High fame. He regularly touched on queer cinema and feminist cinema and mumblecore and like art house cinema and relating all these things to the ideologies that spawn them and so on and so forth. Like you were incredibly late to the party, and it is incredibly obvious that you didn't even do market research before you showed up, Anita, because if you had done market research, you would have known about the reviewer sphere of 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 the internet that dominated, if not YouTube, because they were banned off of YouTube for fair use reasons. At the very least, the internet by way of Blip TV for a good solid probably 10 years. Moving on.
Yeah, okay. Second, the series, the series influence persists to this day. The Keynesians work can be tied to a rise in more inclusive portrayals of women. People started to recognize this filter again to diversity. Arcane Studios, uh, Harvey Smith spoke to Sarkeesian about the influence of feminist frequency on his work. He specifically called out and said didn't said he'd remember forever Sarkeesian's criticism of dishonoring women. Every woman in Dishonor 1 is either a servant, prostitute, witch, a queen, or a little girl. Smith told Sarkeesian in a
Because
video on Injustice, would the game be worse if we took an action on this, or would it be better? The game would be richer and more interesting, Harvey said. Dishonored DLC onward, our game made a deliberate effort to put women in more interesting roles.
okay, one, feminism is not women. Two, are there that many male characters who aren't defined in some way by their occupation um, or their status as the hero role? Because here's the thing: Hirwoa, from which we get the word hero, meant in its original context servant. Because one of the things that defines a hero, especially in the modern context, Anita, is this thing we call self sacrifice, i.e., putting others before yourself. Mario puts Peach before himself. Um, Link puts Zelda before himself, etc. Like the list goes on and on. Like it's the it's the male hero who slays the dragon for the purpose of finding the princess sentimentally valuable. And I know I'm not the first person to make this point, especially to Anita, because this point was the most obvious criticism of her, where she was claiming women were victims of being put in the morally superior role to men in almost every um video game, and that's why men were saving women, because they considered women valuable and worth putting up with things like, oh, I don't know, slaying a dragon, starting and finishing a war, fighting through a horde of nameless thugs in the name of saving that one woman. But you know what? Never mind. Point being, you did not create the phenomena of strong women, either in any media whatsoever, in reality or in video games, Anita. Samus Aran way predates you. As does Helen Ripley, as does Sarah Connor, as the list, Anita, the list goes on. Like we would be here until the end of time if I was to actually go through the entire goddamn list. But no, you didn't create strong women. You didn't create strong women in video games. You didn't create more fulfilled roles for women in video games, and you sure as shit did not prevent women from occupying the same occupation sorts of niches that men do. God damn it, Anita. It's a cliche to refute Anita at this point. We're not going to go this far into detail, but god damn it. She still thinks she's the only one who values women in a society that literally puts men's safety below the sentimental value of women 9 times out of 10.
Often.
Fucking hell. Moving on.
Similarly, Naughty Dog director Neil Druckmann has spoken about how Sarkeesian's work influenced him personally and how she influenced his decision making on Uncharted.
What was that?
Get out?
You started breaking up again, yeah, a little bit.
Damn it. Similarly, Naughty Dog director Neil Druckmann has spoken about how Sarkeesian's work influenced him personally and how she influenced his decision making on Uncharted 4.
And I do wonder how much of that is just blowing smoke up your ass for the sake of pleasing the woman, Anita. Because again, you didn't create strong women, you didn't create strong women in video games, and you certainly didn't make women feel any more fulfilled. But let's ask Liana Kersner how fulfilled you made her feel. Because back in the day, there was a feminist named Liana Kersner who was viscerally opposed to basically everything Anita gave to the world because it was actually uh, misogynistic in Liana's mind. And while I'm certain I would have disagreements with Liana too, it must be said that her arguments held up to way more scrutiny than yours did, Anita. Moving on.
I do think her work has informed the industry. Martin, a lecturer at the University of Washington, also said, I
Hmm.
mean, part of the reason we keep hearing about harassment and sexism in the industry, I think, is because of her efforts and others like her who forcibly make space for others to follow.
Um, again, Anita, you claim to be this incredible radical with all of your bell hooks, borrowed talking points. Does it not disturb you how quickly and how easily the establishment dropped its mouth open and swallowed everything you handed to it? Does it not disturb you that your only fans are actually among the establishment and only the establishment, Anita? Does it not does it not disturb you that for all your radical credentials, the grassroots actually hate your guts and the only people who will take you seriously are the people in the academic cathedral? Because if I valued radicalism and I valued being an anti-establishment punter, which I suppose I sort of do, kind of, um, and the only people who liked me were establishment voices, and the only people who hated me were the grassroots fan base of the actual thing I was talking about. I would feel very uncertain about my self worth at that point, and I would probably be reevaluating where the actual anti-establishment position is. Tip for you, Anita: the anti-establishment position is the one that the establishment likes to demonize. The pro-establishment position is the one that the establishment tries to lionize at every conceivable turn. So, Anita, I'm going to enjoy this. Um, what did the establishment think of Gamergate? And what did the establishment think of you? And who exactly is the anti-establishment radicals here? And who are the handmaidens to some kind of patriarchy here, my dear Anita? Because, as Voltaire said, if you want to find out who rules over you, find out who you can't criticize. And as a corollary to that, if you want to find out what the establishment dislikes, find out what they will embrace, and find out what they condemn. Moving on.
Hmm. Her work also continues to be referred to in academia, where it influences students to make their own games. Subsets of women in video games is a staple on digital media and video game class syllabuses. Okay, that's fucking sad.
What did they say?
Her work also continues to be referred to in academia, where it influences students who may go on to develop games. Tropes versus women in video games is a staple on digital media and video game class syllabuses.
Yeah, again, Anita, you said one thing one time and the establishment came to your rescue. The grassroots fucking hated your guts and made no secret of telling you so, but the establishment literally lionized you as some sort of secular saint. And yet you think your position is in any way revelatory or radical or revolutionary. And I, how does the cognitive dissonance not eat your brain alive, Anita? If I viewed myself as some kind of anti-establishment, radical for meaningful change, and the only people who liked me were those in the halls of academic legitimacy, and the only people who didn't were the people who, by all rights, I should be considering myself the voice of, I would seriously reevaluate my position in the world, Anita. But to you, you think that you changed the establishment because you told the establishment everything they want to hear, and you think that you have the moral high ground even as you spit on the demonized plebs that the establishment was demonizing anyway. I just, like, again, it's flabbergasting. How can they think they are the morally virtuous rebels while basically the establishment sucks them off, and then they can look at the people that the establishment actually demonize, and rather than reevaluate their position, they just go right along with the demonization, because why not? Because authority and legitimacy and validity are so much more important to them than speaking any kind of truth to any kind of power. It's actually kind of fucking sickening. It is the very definition of pseudo-intellectual. A proper intellectual asks the establishment questions they do not want to hear. A pseudo-intellectual is lavished with all sorts of cultural legitimacy by the establishment. God damn it. Moving on.
Yeah, sorry. We are going to read a little bit more of this, maybe like another paragraph or so, and then we're going to call it for this one, and then move on to. I at least want to get one of the articles done. One of our
Okay. Which of the articles should we do then? Honestly, because it's bell hooks related, I kind of want to do the Ken is a bell hooks referendum on masculinity one, because bell hooks is the
Okay.
feminist who Anita Sarkeesian took the most inspiration from. So I think that works.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, okay, so let's do a little bit more of this and then we'll move on. Mark Santos, an associate professor of English at the University of Northern Colorado, he spent his frequency in undergraduate English class that focused on research writing on video games. Santos said he uses Sarkeesian work on feminist frequency because it stands up to this day, but also a way to show students how to research and present analysis and criticism. In a recent project, hold on. In a recent project,
Sorry.
I do want to finish the thing. In a recent project, students used videos like lingerie is not body armor and strategic butt coverings, which analyze the male gaze in video games, as a basis of analysis of clothing in the first 100 role-playing games that pop up on Steam. I want to point this out.
Okay.
I want to point this out, like one thing. Okay, everyone always talks about the male gaze, but there is the female gaze too. Like, it's a thing.
Yes, yes, and if we were at least consistent in our analysis, that would ever factor in ever, but it doesn't. But more to the point. If you're looking for a person who can entertainingly provide intellectual rigor about your feminist nonsense, sirs and madams, I'm gonna point you towards Lindsay Ellis again. But more even salient than that, if the conversation is about the utility of body armor over aesthetics and so on, then I'm gonna point you at another, albeit a latecomer to the former that guy with the glasses club, which is she called herself Sursum Ursa on Channel Awesome, but she now goes by her real name, which is Joe Barrett. Um, she is also very feministy. She also focuses on the utility rather than the aesthetics of things like body armor. But here's the thing: she actually is somewhat informed on medieval history, martial arts, stage fighting, and etc. And therefore, she has that magical quality known as knowing what the fuck she's talking about. And so, if you want a feminist adjacent sort of person to lecture you on, why functionality should trump aesthetics and body armor, especially around female characters, I think Jill Barup even has a ongoing series of videos where she does do essentially analytical analyses of different or at least like ranking lists of different fictional armors, and then she goes on to actually explain functionally what is wrong with bad armor in various media as opposed to good armor in various media. And she's actually very well informed and intelligent on the subject because she is an actual nerd in addition to being a feminist. And that's the thing. If you want someone who's entertaining and feminist, there's Lindsay Ellis. If you want somebody who can actually, intellectually grok with the whole, functionality in storytelling and shit, there's Joe Barrett. Like, there are so many better examples of what Anita tried to do that actually features some level of fucking competency and also entertainment value. But no, even though Lindsay got there first, or at least significantly before Anita did, she doesn't get mentioned, even though she should. Even though Jill is actually better at addressing that criticism of Anita's, which she gave no context to and made a completely facile ass of herself when making it, she doesn't get mentioned either. Or if she does, you failed to mention her here. So, like, what the fuck is wrong with the establishment of academia? If you're looking for actual academic rigor, even within your own framework, it exists somewhere out there. Like, Jesus, tap dancing, sashaying, Christ, this bugs me. There are people, even within your own ranks, who are better at this than she could ever hope to be. And yet, she is the one you're putting on the goddamn pedestal. The pseudo intellectual Barbie. That's Anita's nickname now, at least for me. She is now pseudo intellectual Barbie. God damn it. Moving on.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, and then we'll move on. I think a lot of students, both men and women, have sort of realized that the portrayal of women in all marginalized groups in video games is bad, but Sarkeesian's work helps focus their attention. Dante said she provides a lens through which it becomes almost impossible to deny or ignore the extent of fuck off.
Yeah, no. Even thinking of the feminist lens is a good thing, which I would argue it isn't, but even 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 on the metric of feminism, Anita fails. Liana Kersner, Jill Barup, Lindsay Ellis, ContraPoints, like the list goes on and on and on. There are so many people who are better than Anita and or have been doing it longer than Anita and more consistently and more competently than Anita. God damn it. Moving on.
Yeah. Let's give it a second, it's loading. I do want to point this out that me and Don aren't exactly like big gamers.
Well, I'm a retro gamer, if anything. I've
Right.
always
But
been quite a big retro gamer. But because of my disability, I don't console game very often because the hand-eye coordination is nerfed by cerebral palsy, simply put. But yes, I would still consider myself a gamer, and even if you don't consider yourself a gamer, let's be honest, the various geek identities they overlap and intermingle. So an attack on gamers is an attack on all nerd kind, and I will not put up with that shit, whether I be in the category of gamer by your definition or not.
right. Well, also I kind of stopped gaming because like there really are no interest. There are very few games that really interest me to play them these days.
The last good game I ever played was Cuphead. Cuphead was an amazing game, and it definitely scratched my retro itch.
It's guys really are gonna do a Ghost versus Winner video games, aren't they? All right.
Um, I don't have any preference for like the turn structure of games, Dragon Turtle. I've played quite a few turn-based strategy type games. But I don't I don't have any particular like I really like retro games. I really like platformers. I really like stuff that has sort of an old school cartoonish kitsch. Like I say, Cuphead was an amazing game. Cuphead is probably gold standard for how you do a modern game in my opinion. Um,
Um,
but yeah,
the
I don't really have a preference for turn structure.
the last game I really think I played was DC Universe Online, but I never got to really finish it. That was like almost a decade ago. I played it.
I mean, if we count apps, I game quite a lot because I am on level I'm on level 76 of Marvel Strike Force, and I'm on level 22 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. Which, side note, it's really good to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh! After all these years.
Right.
I
Okay.
I unlocked two of the Egyptian God cards recently, and I squeed internally because I remember how awesome the Egyptian God cards were in the anime.
All right. That's from MSNBC.com. Can Isabel Hook's critique come to life in Barbie? It's written by Norman, published July 24th. The movie offers us a humorous and very keen critique on the patriarchy and the conformity of gender.
I mean, not really. That's what it's trying to do, but it ended up being a stealth men's rights movie. Because what the movie makers thought they were trying to do, thought they were doing, was playing the gender switcheroo card. They put the Kens in a second class citizenship role in Barbie World, thinking they were doing hey, what if we treated men in Barbie World like women were historically treated, TM. But what they actually ended up doing, because the feminist framework is so foobar, is when they were trying to satirize the real world in Barbie World, they actually end up presenting in the Kens a relatively three-dimensional and accurate portrayal of male vulnerability outside of the tradcon role or the social justice role. And in so doing, they kind of made an accidental men's rights movie, even though they were trying to use the Kens to see to do a Look, see how society used to treat women in history, which they didn't successfully do at all. They were trying to satirize, what if men were treated like women, and they wound up just portraying men accurately when they treated them like they think women were treated historically. Because of course women were not treated that way historically, usually at all. um, Moving on.
Right. Barbie has a great day every day, but Ken only has a great day if Barbie looks at him. The narrator, voiced by Helen Mirren, says in the beginning of it is one of the most iconic and searing lines of the film because of the painful truth it contains. Men are raised to understand their own value as being inextricably bound with their sexuality. What?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's half true in the sense that men are instrumentalized and treated that their only value comes from what they do, but it has nothing explicitly to do with sexuality. It has to do with the fact that women are seen by society as sentimentally valuable, whereas men are only or mostly valuable for their utility. Women are in the like hyper traditionalist sense value objects, and men are appliances. And you can look at that and see, oh, they're reducing men down to their sexuality. Yet no, they're reducing men down to male vulnerability, which is something that neither feminists nor traditionalists are particularly keen to pay attention to. Because if you don't fit in the real man TM box of the traditionalists, then you are morally invalid. And if you don't fit in the male feminist box of the feminist imagining, then you are seen as morally invalid. There is no room in either of these frameworks for male vulnerability that doesn't involve weaponizing male disposability for the sake of other people. Usually, traditionally the line, women and children first comes up. And funny thing about the whole women and children first thing, because I was thinking about this earlier, the women and children first thing on the surface might seem to be something that would be inclusive of at least male children. But in addition to the women and children first standard that even the most traditionalist of the traditionalists will adhere to, you have this incentive for young boys to grow up that there is no equivalent for in young girls, to the point that in most contexts girl and woman are used relatively interchangeable, as in you go girl. um, but men and boy are not in that same way interchangeable, to the point that to call a grown ass man a boy is considered an insult, as is the term man child. There is no such word, or no such word in common parlance at least, as woman child, or you're not, or the sentiment you're not a woman, you're only a girl. But there sure as shit is for men, and they get it from both feminists, normie gynocentrists, and traditionalists. Because men are valued for what they do, women are valued for what they are. But you look at that and you reduce it down to sexuality. Anyway, moving on.
Much like the rest of the film, which both plays into and subverts gender stereotypes, the line operates on multiple levels. It places the central male character under the female gaze, inverting the status quo, and it speaks to a larger truth. The uproarious laughter in the movie theater where I watched Barbie was a good indicator that the film wrestled with some uncomfortable truths, and this is precisely why it provoked the ire of critics on the left. Many who rapidly object to the film without having seen it. Barbie is a nuclear-level feminist nonsense that hates men and pushes gender ideology onto children. One YouTuber who rallied against the film had not seen his video review. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican Texas, yeah. So the long list of Republicans who trying to make Barbie the enemy of the
Okay. There's so much wrong with that. Oh, God damn it. We need to go sentence by sentence. It's not a thing we can do paragraph by paragraph. Okay.
You want me to
But,
repeat
like, no, just, okay. The whole female gaze is subverting the status quo. Bitch, this is exactly where you're going upside down. Because that is not subverting the status quo at all. That whole, that whole Barbie has a good day every day, but Ken only is valuable, or Ken only has a good day if he's looked at by Barbie thing. That is a sentiment that is accurate to damn near 98% of all men. Men as a whole love female approval, whether it's the approval of their girlfriends, sisters, and wives, or whether it's the approval of their mothers. And this is the thing: even if you are as gay as Big Gay Al, you will have sentimental attachment to women because you have a sentimental attachment, barring severe abuse, to your mother. I can confirm this. I am very, very gay, and yet I still catch myself having not only am I gay, I'm a gay MRA, and I still have the gynocentrism bug. So don't be so this whole oh, let's centralize the female gaze and treat men like second class citizens. That's a subversive, reinterpretation of the status quo. That is exactly where this movie goes right the fuck upside down. And that's exactly why it's a stealth men's rights movie. Because when they think they're being absurdist and subversive and satirical, they're being more accurate to reality than they are when they're trying to reflect reality. Because feminism, in this context, in how it is structured and presented here, is literally exactly back to front. It is the satire of how Ken acts when he is vulnerable is more accurate to the male, the internal emotional male vulnerability and experience than anything in the patriarchy of feminist imagining that is in the quote unquote real world. Because feminists don't realize that men are devoted to and want the approval and the sentimental attachment of women, but they do. That in fact, 90% of the problem with feminism could be resolved if they just got it through their heads that the reason why men choose to adopt this stoic traditionalist role a lot of the time, this protector provider role that feminists hate so much and traditionalists will not let go of no matter how much you try to pry it away from them, is because men inherently, on average, value their women, and they want to please their women, and they want to please anyone who sees sentimental value or at least some kind of value in what they do. Because I will remind you, and this is why I brought this up earlier, men do not get anything like as much sentimental value inherently bequeathed to them as women do. Men are generally speaking, and again, I'm speaking in generalities, so don't anyone go, how extreme of you to point out this thing, here's a bunch of counterexamples. Like, men in general are valued for what they do, and only for what they do. Women in general are valued for what they are, and mostly what they are. Doesn't mean there aren't exceptions, but as a general rule, whether you be a traditionalist or a feminist, you want men in their useful utilitarian box, and you want women in their sentimental value object box. And until we can address this point and realize that it is the desire of men to be liked, to be useful, and to be valued, usually and predominantly by women, that leads them to this stoic role, at least to some degree. Obviously, there's biological truths involved here, and men do trend that way psychologically. But gee, I wonder where that evolutionary pressure must have come in. Could it be that women selected men who have that preset? But I digress. But obviously, there is an evolutionary component here. But in general, the reason why men choose to adopt this stoic role, even when it is detrimental to them, is because they want to please people, and in particular, they want to please women. But if feminists or traditionalists ever got that through either of their heads, it would short circuit this entire rigmarole. Because the traditionalist stance, especially in extreme cases, is men will not be good unless we make them good. And the feminist stance is men are bad unless we make them better, or at least neutral. Neither of these people seem to allow for the fact that men on average are average. Not good, not bad, just in the middle of the bell curve, god damn it. And in truth, in honest to goodness truth, most men actually are good. Because in order to actually create a misogynist in a meaningful way, you have to traumatize and break that child's brain. You have to take a young boy and beat them senseless, either physically or psychologically, if you want to make the kind of sociopath that the toxic masculinity label would actually apply to. Because men in general are actually fairly empathetic creatures. Their empathy just doesn't take the form of abstract, emotional, touchy-feely empathy. It takes the form of someone I love has a problem. I'm going to put my life on the line or my resources on the line so that I can try and fix it for them. And again, usually that does apply to women. It is women on average that men have the most empathy for. Doesn't mean they don't have any empathy for other men, but on average, if it came down to shoot every man you see on sight for women's approval or protect other men against women, most men are going to engage in the fucking shooting gallery. Moving on.
Feminist blockbuster with its record-breaking $155 million opening weekend. The cultural phenomenon even before it had been released, thanks to its near unhinged levels of marketing, offers us a humorous and very peak on the patriarchy and the conformity of it. It adeptly and accessibly explores the crisis that is masculinity. It is not so much that there is a crisis of masculinity as it is that masculinity is itself a crisis. And, much to the shock and delight of my anti-Barbie doll feminist queer heart, the film offers many of the same critiques on masculinity that feminist cultural critic Bell Hooks offered us.
Bell Hooks, again, for full context of who Bell Hooks is and why her name alone makes my skin crawl, you can thank Bell Hooks for just about every single Anita Sarkeesian talking point. And she will admit as much as well, because she cites Bell Hooks more than she cites any other feminist writer in her videos. God damn it. Moving on.
In a pioneering book, Rose changed men, masculinity, and love. Hooks unpacks a number of ideas into towards the film. The Supreme Kim, played by Ryan Gosling, narrative arc. Warning, spoilers ahead. The film begins with Kim pining for Barbie's attention and Barbie's intro to love, while following Barbie to the real world, where he discovers patriarchy. This becomes an outlet for all the pain, anguish, and rage associated with his masculinity, which he secretly supports back into Barbie's world, transformed it into an assertive version of the real world before Barbie was able to damage it.
Now, mind you, this alleged real world of the movies is not anything like the actual real world. It is the feminist it is the feminist stereotype of the real world. And I mention that because it is important to keep in mind that if Ken, the character as presented in the movie, found his way to the real world, it's highly unlikely he would have glommed on to this toxic Logan Paul meets Andrew Tate style of patriarchy. It's highly probable he might have found his way to people like Tom Golden, Paul Elam, Warren Farrell, the Honey Badgers, etc. I.e., the only reason why Ken adopts this toxic masculinity of yours is it's because it's the only alternative to his, second class citizenship and unrequited vulnerabilities that the movie presents him with. And even here, the movie actually has something intelligent to say, even though it doesn't think it, even though it thinks it's saying the opposite. Because while I would prefer a world where every man who was disgruntled by the feminist and social justice gobbledygook found his way to Paul Elam, Tom Golden, Janice Mango, Warren Farrell, Aaron Pitsey, etc. Even though I would love a world where every woman was a honey badger and every man found his way to like the Men Are Good podcast, um, or at the very least a Jordan Peterson type person. For every one of those, you'll find at least 5 or 10 people who find their way to Andrew Tate instead, or Logan Paul instead, or Roosh V instead, because Roosh V was basically the proto Andrew Tate back in the day, and it's because those voices are a bit louder, and it must be said that if you give men no outlet for their vulnerabilities and give them no ability to feel any sort of intrinsic self-worth for themselves that isn't tied to what they do, especially what they do for other people, the first person they come across that will offer something like that is going to be massively appealing to them. So for every person who digs long enough to find their way to men's rights, you're gonna wind up with at least some people who run into Andrew Tate or Roosh V long before they run into Paul Elam, and then boom, you've got a generation full of PUAs who actually are, these toxic Gaston-like dude bros to some degree. But point being about the movie though, like the only reason why Ken becomes, a Logan Paul Andrew Tate type person, it's because that's the only patriarchy you gave him to adhere to. Had you given an actual portrayal of a men's rights advocate, he would have been an MRA. Moving on.
Right. Then patriarchy is depicted in Wayne and Barbie's world. The Kens convert all the Barbies greenhouses into man caves, replete with saloon-style doors, leather sofas, and flat screen TVs with horses on them, repudiating all that is aesthetically feminine, and so correct in the world of change. A man who is unabashedly and unequivocally committed to patriarchal masculinity will both fear and hate all that tortures is feminine and womanly. You assholes do that to be fair.
Yeah, no, that's not something. That's not how men define themselves at all. Men define themselves by their utility, by their service role, because most men, at least intuitively, understand the notion that, like I've said at least 3 times now, men are valued for their utility, what they do, and women are valued for their sentimentality of what they are. And to be entirely fair, the place that Ken goes to in the movie to learn about what patriarchy is a library where he reads a bunch of feminist texts. So what does that say about where he's getting these patriarchal ideas from? Not from he didn't pick up Warren Farrell's The Myth of Male Power. He didn't He didn't pick up Cassie J's The Red Pill. He picked up a bunch of feminist literature. I think I saw The Invisible Knapsack in there. I think I saw The Feminist Mystique in there. I think I even saw Feminism is for Everyone by Bell Hooks in there. Like he read feminist literature and defined his patriarchy or his masculinity by what he found in those books, not in the kinds of things that men's rights advocates or even PUAs write for themselves. Of course, if you had done that, you might actually have to become aware of those materials. And if you had actually read some MRA mainstays, like, for example, Warren Farrell's The Myth of Male Power, you probably wouldn't have such a goddamn bee in your bonnet about it, because your feminist definition of what an MRA is bears absolutely no resemblance to what an MRA actually is. You think MRAs are fascist, totalitarian, toxic dude bros, when in actuality, a lot of men's rights advocates are just men who admit how the system works and want to be sentimentally valuable in at least a comparable way to how women are, and acknowledge the fact that historically women have been gifted more and more rights or entitlements, whereas men's rights has basically stayed the same place it was 300 years ago. And it must be said that for most of human history, human rights as a concept was not a thing. It wasn't the concept of human rights as a actual ideological construct was not really a thing until the Enlightenment in the 1700s. Prior to that, no one had human rights. Your rights were based on your placement in the feudal hierarchy, whether how much of an aristocrat you were. And wouldn't you go right ahead and know it, the first people we gave rights to after discovering the idea of human rights were the people who were already tangentially related to the aristocratic class. And immediately following that, the first port of call was not let's give it to all of the men, it was let's give it to the women. In fact, there were quite a few first wave feminists who literally advocated women getting suffrage before black men or working class men. And yet we never fucking talk about that little canard, do we? We never talk about how Susan B. Anthony said, if black men get the vote before all women get the vote, then the oppression black women will know under their own men will be even worse than that they might have experienced under the slave master's lash. That is only barely paraphrased, by the way, and that's mostly because I couldn't remember word for word the quote. Moving on. Yeah.
Ken's vengefulness, which makes his rage, shame, and insecurities, is largely a byproduct of Barbie's lack of sexual or romantic interest in him. Ken is a stereotypical patriarchal man who is raised to believe his identity and worth is explicitly tied to his sexuality and ability to sexually dominate women. The underlying message boys receive about sexual acts is that they will be destroyed if they are not in control, exercising power. But later in the book she adds, to take the inherent positive sexuality of males and humans and violence is a patriarchal crime that is perpetuated against the male body. Men know what is happening. They have simply been taught not to speak the truth of their bodies, the truth of their sexuality. What the fuck?
Okay, fuck. Again, you're strawmanning male nature here, both Bell Hooks and this writer. It's not about sex. It's not about romance. Those two things are sometimes expressions of what it's about. But need I remind you, explicitly in the movie, neither Barbie nor Ken have genitals of any description whatsoever. They are neuter. They do not have genitals. So there is no sex in Barbie world, as there should not be, for it is a child's, it is a dimension powered and sustained by the faith of children, and we really, really shouldn't associate that with sexuality. But mind you, neither Barbie nor Ken have any junk whatsoever, and they only have the loosest definition of what dating or romance even is. What this is a reflection of is Ken wants Barbie's approval. He wants her sentimental regard. He wants her to care about him and his vulnerabilities, to treat him as though he is of some worth. Because as the movie itself points out, Barbie has a great day whenever she wakes up. Ken only has a good day when Barbie looks at him. Which is to say, not in a sexual or romantic way, but in a way that denotes sentimental regard. Because, mind you, Barbie doesn't just avoid having sexual or romantic feelings for Ken, she avoids seeing him as anything other than a disposable tool at best and a literal validation accessory at worst. And if that isn't a good summation of the male experience, I don't know what fucking is. But seriously, you're you're basically making this miscalculation because you think men are primitive and animalistic, and because you think men are tabula rasa and will project whatever society gives them onto other things. And no, men do have a deeper emotional life. They do have a deeper cognitive life than that. And that's why it is both dehumanizing and strawmanish to reduce Ken's desire for Barbie's sentimental regard for or attachment to him to, oh, she just wants to fuck him or be romantic, or he just wants to fuck her or be romantic with her. And G, why do we engage with our significant others romantically? It's because, and this isn't a trick question, right? It's because we love them. We want their positive emotional affiliation. We want to experience at least some of the love we have for our significant others reflected back to us. Because we consider our significant others to be valuable and worthwhile, and we want them to see us in turn as as worthwhile and sentimentally worth something. And that's why you could have people who are completely fucking asexual but are not aromantic. Granted, there are some people who are both asexual and aromantic, and obviously, asterisks need not apply to those people. But there are plenty of people who are nominally asexual who are not aromantic, because romance is actually about emotional affiliation even more so than sex is. And when you get right down to it, sex is also, at least for humans and most other intelligent mammals, about emotional regard in some way. It's just you wanted to reduce the male experience down to the purest, most animalistic, oh, they just want to screw, and so you completely ignored the emotional or sentimental aspect of it. Fuck you, madam. Moving on.
Right. Okay. What's more? Oh, actually, Grant said something. Side tangent. Thing that is just social. I think that is just socialization, or that kids, male, female, or both, develop a drive for romance, or at least fantasies about it one day, long before sex. I think it's regarding to the how Barbie world works.
Oh, I personally do maintain that kids do um develop a notion of romance long before they know what sex is. That's why it's not corruptive or pedophilic to show them, Disney movies where the prince kisses the princess, or movies where, for example, Mitch Down has a boyfriend before anyone goes there. That's why I make the distinction between sexual content being shown to kids and romantic content being shown to kids. And why I personally say you can have gay characters in a kids movie without it in any way being sexual, just like you can have Prince Charming kids Snow White and it's not sexual. Because if you don't believe that you can have a romantic gay subplot in a kids movie that features no sex, then you must also believe that Prince Charming kissing Snow White is straight propaganda. I don't hold by either of these things.
Hello?
Mhm.
What's more, sex or in Ken's case, simply spending the night with Barbie because neither he nor Barbie has genitals, nor do they fully grasp what sex is, becomes an outlet for all the anxieties associated with his masculinity. Um,
Oh, for fuck's sake! It's
hold on,
because
hold on. Let me.
yeah.
Actually,
Go ahead.
no. Actually, wait. Yeah, go.
Okay. It's because he has a desire for emotional and sentimental validation, and he has vulnerabilities that are not being dealt with. And as you yourself just outlined, and I mentioned earlier before I realized you were going to get to this, neither Barbie nor Ken have genitals or even an adult sex drive because their realm is created and sustained by the belief and power and like faith of children. And bully for them for not getting really really squiggy. But yeah, and by the way, even the straightest of straight kids will have you know sleepovers with their male friends, and even the straightest of straight young girls will have sleepovers with their female friends. It's probably more to do with the idea of I want to have a closer, more intimate friendship relationship with Barbie, and she is she's my friend thing. That's probably what's being expressed there, because Barbie and Ken are both naive to the real world, at least until Barbie experiences mortality salience because an older woman is playing with her and working out her midlife crisis through playing with her. But that's just by the by. Yeah, the reason why Ken wants to sleep over with Barbie at Barbie's house probably has less to do with romance and or fucking, and more to do with it being a sign of close personal friendship connection. And there's some logic to go by there. Like for example, I almost never invited anyone over to my house as a kid because I was always kind of insecure about the lifestyle choices that I had to make to function normally because I was a disabled person, um, and it always made me feel uncomfortable and always made me have to it always made me have more barriers up than the average person. So I can definitely vouch for the fact that to sleep over with someone even before you develop sexually is like a close personal friendship bond thing. And that's probably what he wants more from her than sex, especially because neither of them have genitals. Moving on.
What's more? Hold on, sorry. Sex then becomes a way of solacing, solacing. Both right. It is not about connecting to someone else, but rather about releasing your own pain. Both describes how this dynamic, whereby sex offers a brief reprieve from the strictures of the patriarchal masculinity, often creates an addictive relationship with sex. The addict
Oh.
is often hold on. The addict is often an individual in acute pain, patriarchal men have no outlet to express the pain, so they simply there you go.
Here's the thing. For all the feminist theory gobbledygook, you don't want that. You don't want men to define themselves as individuals themselves in separation from or opposition to either women or feminism, because and I can prove this, because when men do that, when men define themselves as separate from women by doing things that women wouldn't necessarily be okay with or wanting them to do, The landslide of male shame that is bequeathed onto men who do that is quite self-evident. You know, is there anything a man can do that will make a woman more repulsed by him than say, I'm a PUA, I'm an MRA, I'm an anti-feminist, or hell, even I'm a gamer, I'm a nerd, I like Dungeons and Dragons. Prior to the feminist desire to co-opt those things because they viewed them as cultural touchstones, there was nothing more repugnant than that, even to the point that even still now, many of the anti-nerd strawmans and stereotypes get applied to the term incel, mostly because the term nerd doesn't quite work anymore. And let's face it, even the term nerd is not as is not clean because the differentiation even for people who want to co-opt the geek identity or the nerd identity, even that differentiation was necessary, and that's why we saw the creation of the term toxic fandom, which basically means all the negative things we used to project onto nerd, we only project to a portion of nerds, but it's the same portion of nerds because the things we find to be toxic fandom are sincerely liking the thing for its own sake, liking the thing for non-political or non-moral reasons, or having a sentimental regard for the thing in itself rather than its thematic implications and shit. So basically, if you're a nerd who unironically likes the nerdy stuff he likes and doesn't see it as some kind of utilitarian weapon, i.e., a true nerd, in my definition, you will get all the negative stereotypes of a nerd projected back onto you. They'll just call it toxic fandom now because they realized they couldn't get away with broad brushing the entire category of nerd like they used to. So yeah, when men define themselves as separate from women or try to find an identity that's separate from women, not only do they get the shit shamed out of them, but also anyone trying to provide that resource will either be morally shamed until they fall in line or actively demonized. How does the establishment regard MRAs again? How does the establishment regard PUAs? How does the establishment regard Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate? That's right, they demonize the fuck out of them because that is what it looks like when men attempt to define their identity as separate from or not related to women or women's standards. And it terrifies the fuck out of everyone apparently, be they the traditionalists or the feminists, or even a lot of the most gynocentric normies. Moving on.
Right. Sorry. Muted for a second. Okay. In the final scene of Barbie, after the Barbie doll successful uprising. Sorry. I was gonna say. Uh, in the final scene of Barbie, after Barbie doll's successful uprising, Ken completely unravels. The original Barbie spiraling into an existential crisis when he is denied everything he believes defines him as manhood. Chiefly, this includes Barbie's sexual and romantic interests, his ability to dominate others, and his passion for capitalism. Things White said, man, like many fridges in Adidas boxes. What the?
Again, there is no sexual or romantic. Well, there might be a romantic aspect to it, but there is zero sexual aspect to this. What Ken wants is the sentimental regard he has for Barbie to be returned, and he would very much like it if she cared or at least acknowledged his vulnerabilities and appreciated his skills and utility. Because again, as a man, he defines his worth by what he does or what he thinks, and as a result, he wants to use what he does or what he thinks to please and get the approval of Barbie. Sex or no sex, romance or no romance. And more to the fucking point, you skipped over a bit there, which is kind of interesting for the movie because you want to know how this whole Ken's dominate Barbie world and then Barbie's rise up against Ken's uh, in turn thing happens because it's a bit of a doozy. So Ken goes back to Barbie world, talks to the other Kens about instituting the Kendom, which good on you writers for at least basic meme competency. Um, but he goes to them and he talks about them. He talks about instituting the Kendom. Then the Kens explain this to the Barbies, and the majority of the Barbies go along with it and are happy. Then original Barbie, played by Margot Robbie, America Ferrera's character from the real world, and her daughter come into the picture, see the Barbies showing some kind of sentimental attachment to and appreciation of their Kens, are abjectly horrified, ask the Barbies what the frick happened, and the Barbies explain that they are happy because they never realized how unappreciated their Kens were, and they're happy to show their Kens some regard, especially because their Kens are more attractive to them now than they have ever been. And the original Barbie and America Ferrera's conclusion from this, the Barbies have all been brainwashed. And so they go about using feminist theory to deconvert the happy, mind you, Barbies. And after they do that, the Barbies use the sentimental attachment that the Kens have for them to play the Kens against each other and start the first freaking war that this dimension has ever known. Now, the war in question is mostly dance fighting kung fu, which, is funny and all, but literally women, or the stand-in for women, use their man's sentimental attachment to them to play the men against each other and start a fucking war. I mean, do I even have to say anything, or do we all understand just how fucking actually accurate that might actually be? But more to the point, while the Kens are distracted fighting in the first ever war to ever come to Barbie Land for the sake of the approval of their Barbies, the Barbies outvote them and reinstitute Barbie Land from the Kendom. So, in other words, women used their moral authority over the Kens to distract them with a war and then supplant them. Yeah. Again, accidental men's rights movie. I don't think I even need to explain how accurate to the male condition this actually might be. But yeah, so that's how the Barbie uprising, quote unquote, happens. Hey guys, we're not getting what we want from our men, so let's weaponize our men's positive affiliation towards us, derp, and supplant them. Feminism in a freaking nutshell.
In other words, he believes his value is defined by the things he can achieve rather than who he is. In an anti-patriarchal culture, males do not have to prove their value and worth for Christ. They know from birth that simply being gives them value, the right to cherish and love.
That utility is directed in favor of women, and ostensibly children, but I will remind you, men are encouraged to grow up out of the category of children as much and as quickly as possible, whereas women are allowed to stay at least tangentially in the status of girl for their entire life, which effectively means that if you combine these two sentiments of women and children first and boys should grow out of the category of children as soon as they possibly can, that means, hey boys, stop taking up resources that are meant for your mothers, sisters, and daughters. Moving on.
It is precisely this antidote to patriarchal masculinity which Barbie offers him. She encourages him to explore who he is, what he likes, not what he thinks he should like, not what he thinks others want him to like. She encourages him to recover his sense of self and shows him that who that who is enough.
Okay, and what happens? This isn't in the movie, but what happens when he realizes he actually did like some of the patriarchal quote unquote things that he brought over from the real world? What happens when he finds out that that's actually part of his male nature? Oh, he just gets morally shamed until he changes his mind because that's an unacceptable answer. You you can't actually find some sentimental regard for the things that society forces on you. You must completely deconvert yourself from anything that society wants you to be, which just so happens to be a way that we can turn you into a blank slate, which we will then fill with whatever we want you to be. So, in other words, don't be what society wants you to be what I want you to be. Your own opinions don't appear to come into it, because if you decide you actually find some regard for what society wants from you, then you're still brainwashed. And we will be the ones who decide when you are and are not brainwashed. And never mind the brainwashing we will give you in the meantime. Fucking hell.
Fortune catharsis guided solely by Barbie, a woman willing to do his emotional labor, means seeing him repressing his authenticity into oblivion. First performing a version of himself that he thinks will win Barbie's attention and affection, then performing a version of himself that he thinks the fans will respect and will allow him to dominate. He is ranked by self-loathing and attempts to kill off parts of himself. He loses the ability to love both himself and others. According to Hook, this is a form of cultural abuse patriarchal masculinity and
By, or at least tacitly condoned by, women and men's sentimental attachment to women. That's the thing. Stop acting like women are not at least a feature of or a component of society, because we all know from an evolutionary psychology standpoint, if men didn't do what women wanted, they wouldn't get laid, and therefore whatever strain of men didn't do enough of what their women wanted would essentially non-breed themselves into oblivion. And need I remind you, the most accurate part of this movie is that Ken is principally motivated by his sentimental attack. All of them, mind you, because again, the Barbies were able to use every single Ken's attachment to every sentimental attachment to every single Barbie to start a fucking war and distract them long enough to vote their rights away. Um, Point being, it is principally the sentimental attachment to and respect for women that motivates a large percentage of men. And that being the case, if society is a certain way and expects certain things from men, will we ever have the conversation about how women are in any way to blame, at least indirectly, for any of this? No, we will not, because women are the oppressed, don't you know? Never mind that they have the moral high ground in almost all circumstances. Moving on.
At the film's end, Barbie is confronted with the choice to remain a doll or become a human. The film's writers, Greta Gerwig and her husband Noah Baumbach, enjoy a self-reflexive moment after 2 hours of wrestling with some of our more complex and damaging superstructures. Humans only have one unity, the ghost of return birth by using Vintage to Barbie. Ideas live forever. The feminist critique woven into the fabric of the film, albeit limited and superficial at times, is after all a Barbie film, gives Handler's words even more meaning, as Kim's tie-dye hoodie declares at the end, I am kin enough. Men, in their humanness, are always kin enough, an idea which will hopefully prevail and long outlast the works of books and railways for all of our sakes.
And again, if a man, or in this case a Ken, decides that he actually does like, or that the things society wants from him are in any way reflective of his actual nature, he will be assumed to be brainwashed until we can convince him otherwise. And mind you, it is still the sentimental attachment he has to pleasing others that defines him. And yeah, no. Do I even need to point out that in terms of life expectancy, and I realize this is kind of I realize this is kind of a non sequitur, but it's a relevant non sequitur, goddammit. In terms of life expectancy, women live on average 4 years longer than men. And who died in the majority of the wars? Mind you? Oh, that's right, that would be men. As squiggy as some of the Old Testament things that, conquering armies did to conquered women, the women did at least survive long enough, usually, to raise the next generation of children, and very often long enough to overthrow the people who abused them. So, yeah, you really don't want to play the mortality card in terms of the gender war, my lovelies, because women live longer, and most wars are a cavalcade of broken and distorted male bodies bleeding to death.
His grandchild posted this, commented a little bit ago. I didn't see it until just now. I was on tab with the article the whole time. I actually think that part of the purpose for sex is a sort of emotional pair bonding. If you really sleep around all the time, has a one night stand, so attempts at dating or different, probably have trouble sticking with a partner.
I mean, emotional bonding has far more uses. I will agree that it's at least part of the story, but I don't think humans' emotional lives would be as multifaceted as they are if the evolutionary pressure was just emotional intelligence lets us get laid more. Obviously, that's got to figure into it somewhere because evolution's gonna evolution. But um, I think it's a mistake to say that emotional bonding in the higher way that social animals do is useful only for sex. Um, I mean, how the most prolific species on Earth are insects, and they are so closely bonded that they all essentially have one mind. But it's it's essentially social animals like primates and other mammals that build large enough structures that leave even the insect to shame. So even if on some level that's right, because again, evolution's got to evolution one way or the other. I think if it were just a case of have emotions and then fuck, um, our emotional lives would be a lot less multifaceted than they are. And I think it's ludicrous to I even think it's ludicrous to say um that emotions were necessarily pre-programmed by evolution, in the sense that I think that once you develop a high enough kind of intelligence, you will start experiencing some kind of emotions sort of as an after effect of a growth in intelligence rather than the other way around.
That's the last thing, the positive thing. Now,
Hmm.
it's kind of a bittersweet thing, actually.
Because of the death.
So this is the teaser trailer for the Legend of the White Dragon, which is something we covered on like years ago when we first started using StreamYard. Actually,
When the actual crowdfunding thing just had gotten going.
yeah. Um, so this is made by Bat and the Sun Productions, which are guys who've done actually pretty big, I would say pretty big YouTubers that have done like really cool nerd stuff like Batman fan films, like Shoot Power Beat Down and Fame and remembers that.
Hmm.
And this is bittersweet because this I believe this is the last thing Jason did before his passing. Um, did one of the last projects he did. Um,
Which also, yes, of course, means no more Tommy cameos in Power Rangers, and it's just sad.
yeah. Um, and I thought, we have talked about this before. Tom and I are actually pretty big Power Rangers fans, or well, Tokusatsu fans, I
Well,
guess.
no, because I haven't seen much of the Sentai stuff.
I haven't either. I've seen more of the indie stuff that has been like on YouTube and stuff. That's pretty good. I think,
Yeah, but I think there does have to be a demarcation between Power Rangers and the Sentai. Not saying you can't be a fan of both. I'm saying they're different. I'm just saying they're different things.
yeah, yeah. Pseudo Power Rangers thing at the very least this is.
Yeah, it's very obviously basically the Power Ranger story that Jason David Frank wanted to tell, but they didn't have Sentai footage to tie it into, or they wouldn't let him.
Right. Honestly, I would say this is like that unauthorized Power / Rangers fan film done right. That's because I don't really like that fan film.
I didn't hate it. I understand people's criticisms of it, but I actually kind of like it.
Like, yeah, I think it's just the overall. It goes too dark. I think it's kind of my issue with it. It doesn't have a balance.
I mean that's fair enough. I do wonder what a full length like episode or series of it would have been,
Yeah.
because that was basically a glorified trailer for it, or a clip.
Mm, um, anyway, full screen. Um, there's something we can say that
Um.
the first thing that comes to mind is Go Power Rangers, but that's kind of a mouthful.
Um. The only thing I can come up with would be like singing the Dragon Dagger music, but that seems a little bit convoluted. The
Yeah.
do 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 do.
So that's just stick with banana right now, just because I don't think we can come up with
Yeah,
anything.
I can't think of any specialized food stuff that are like heavily associated with Power Rangers.
I mean, reference time would be
I mean we could always dust off the old Alpha meme and go I, but that also seems a little bit convoluted.
yeah. Okay, so banana it is then.
But banana for the time being, yes.
The prophecy tells of a duel between the two dragons of a shared crystal. We must join together to prevent the schemes of evil men. Peregrine, there is so much you don't know. All that matters is that you want.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to say like this is to Power Rangers what the Orville is to Star Trek, probably would be the best way of putting it.
I also want to say, like, yeah, I'm aware that it looks kind of cheap and it is an indie film, so it is. I will admit it does look a lot better than a lot of other like things out there. To be fair, like
Uh,
even like bigger budgeted films.
I mean, to be fair, Power Rangers has always had that kind of endearingly cheap look to it, so it fits in the space of like Power Rangers adjacent stuff.
Fair enough. Still looks cool though. It looks good.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some passion behind this, and it does strike me as a like the serious story that Jason David Frank wanted to tell with Tommy but couldn't, probably.
Mm-hmm. And I think they're setting up like it's only a minute and a half long trailer, but it's setting up the premise really well, better than like other trailers we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
We're already getting like the two sides, the protagonist and antagonist. So I respect that they're not beating around the bush. They're getting straight to the point.
Well, and it's also building lore and building tension in a way that modern movies don't seem to bother anymore.
Yeah.
I miss it. But Banana.
All that matters is that you are now a white dragon. The spirit to fight is still strong within you.
You took everything from me.
You can't change.
Yeah, I can definitely see that this is like a redrafted version of a Tommy retakes the White Tiger Power script that he had during Zeo. I could totally see that.
Yeah. Also pretty big cast too.
And I'm almost positive that Jason David Frank is not the only Power Rangers alum here either.
Yeah, no, that if you know, there's a guy who played Wes from Time Force there, and girl from Mega Force, like the Yellow Ranger.
Yep.
John Young Bosch is supposed to be part of this too. If I remember from like the promo stuff they did a couple years back.
Yeah, I again, this was so obviously a Tommy goes through like his midlife crisis and ends up having to reclaim the White Tiger powers. I almost wish Power Rangers had let him, someone affiliated with Power Rangers had let him do this as the in-universe thing he probably originally intended.
Mm-hmm.
Was it the White Tiger that he was in Zeo? I want to say it was, but it might have actually been a White Dragon. Never mind.
No, it was White Tiger. It was White Tiger, and it wasn't Zeo. It was the original man from like season 2.
Right. Okay. After Green Ranger, but before he became the Red Turbo. Okay.
Red
Sorry.
Zeo.
Was he the Red Zeo one too? Okay. Fuck me. It's been a while, guys. Sorry. But yeah, I just remember it was green, and then it was white, and then it was red, and then
Black.
he was gone for a while, and then he became the mentor and the Black Dino Thunder Ranger, which was actually like I came in right between Ninja Storm and Dino Thunder, so like that was the first place I ever saw him.
Oh yeah, same. Ninja Storm was where I got into it, like the Disney era, kind of.
And I remember it was the perfect time to get in too, because that was right around the time that JetX started their like 10-year anniversary of Power Rangers, so I was able to like binge watch the entire series and get into the lore, and you guys know how much I love the lore.
Yeah. I will say the thing that I kind of hope, at least within the movie, is that it has a really cool soundtrack, because I will be fully honest, the music that they're using here is very generic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, trailer and also limited resources.
Well, no, okay. Here's the thing. I've looked at that in the sound for a while, and some of the guys who work on the channel, like do this stuff, is a composer. So.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, they do need to gives more effort to the music. But yeah, so far though, I really like this. It's giving me all the Mighty Morphin nostalgia feels.
Mm-hmm. Kelly?
Yep, banana.
Change the past. You have to let it go. All you can do is show up now.
Yeah, this was so obviously originally a Power Rangers script.
Let's see what we're working with.
And I'm not disparaging, by the way. I can literally hear a potential version of this where it would have been Tommy going through like a midlife crisis, and the other Rangers telling him to, let the past go, and some MacGuffin allowing him to possibly change the past. I'm seeing through the rewrites, and I'm seeing the original version, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But too much banana energy is dangerous. Sorry. Had to stick that somewhere.
Banana or
Banana.
Where is Eric Reed?
Sorry, but that sounds way too much like Eric Breen. I couldn't help but giggle at that.
$2024.
Oh, it's gonna hurt. It's like every time I hear Kevin Conroy's voice now, there's a part of me that still hurts. This is gonna hurt. In a good way, but it's going to hurt. Oh, nostalgia. Why are you such a cruel, heartless bitch?
Yeah, explain things up. Last 10 seconds. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nostalgia. Painful nostalgia.
Oh, if and when that comes out, we might do. Granted, we'll have to wait another year. But we might do we might do a review of that.
Yeah. We might actually have to.
Yeah.
If you're a Power Rangers fan and you don't love Tommy, there is actually something wrong with you.
To be fair, I was more of an Adam guy. I mean, nothing against Tommy. It's just Johnny on Bosch always had more charisma to me.
I mean, fair play, I suppose, but the Green Ranger arc was the first time Power Rangers was something you could take seriously, and I think it was formative to an entire generation.
I'm not denying that. I'm just saying, like, of my own personal experience with Tommy.
No, I know. I'm just justifying my Tommy simping. To be fair, I am far from the only person in the Power Rangers fandom who simps for Tommy hardcore. Every time he shows up, there's something that calls us from wherever we might be to the screen.
So
I wish they were able to bring him back one last time to have him be a mentor again. He was a really good mentor, and it was the first time like the post Zordon seasons had really like come into contact with the Zordon era seasons for a while, so it was really good.
Yeah. With that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avidase, sayonara, cheers, and
Green simping and fuck off.